Hi, my name's Karina Walter and welcome to the Standard Newsroom. I'm here with St. Catharines Mayor Walter Sendzik for our very first Chat with the Mayor. Mayor Sendzik will be visiting us every month to discuss city issues, and you can find the conversations here on our website at the St. Catharines Standard. You can also send questions ahead of time for our next chat in March by tweeting them with the hashtag #AskSendzik or posting them to our Facebook page. So welcome, Mayor Sendzik.
Thank you. You just got to make sure they spell Sendzik right. So I saw a couple of hashtags that came in with a CK at the end, and I thought that's not going to get through to where it needs to get through to. So
we were going to go with Ask Walter, but it might be confusing because I am also a Walter. So.
Hey, we'll combine it.
No, I guess. I wanted to start off with the big news of the day, which was the redevelopment of the NHS hospital site on Ontario Street. Most people know of it as the old Hotel Dieu Hospital. Yep. $154 million or $145 million development. It's going to be a retirement community for seniors.
Right.
How big was this announcement for the city?
Well, when you look at that amount of investment, it's probably been the better part of the last 30 years where you haven't seen that kind of private sector investment in what would be a downtown area. So while the public investments that have taken place with the Performing Arts Center and with the Meridian Center are substantive, and together they match the 140 million. This is the single largest private sector investment that will be made in our downtown in more than a generation. So put it in that perspective, and it's going to be a catalyst for not only redeveloping that gateway into our downtown, but also adding so many more people into the downtown complement and really changing the look of what it will now be, that corridor going into what is a rebirth of a downtown area. So, you know, from a transformational perspective, I think this is just the next significant step that's being taken as we grow our city. So it's pretty exciting.
Do you know any details about it yet, other than kind of the very limited details we got yesterday?
So I can give you some of the backstory. In terms of their planning is working with our planning very closely on sort of the final concepts. So I've seen some conceptual renderings, but nothing is finalized. So I'm not at liberty to really talk about what the development could look like. And what we're hoping is that when they finalize with our planning department what it's going to look like, then we'll do another announcement to show the public what the site's going to look like, which I think, based on their previous builds, are very exciting and very attractive. But the backstory on it is it's been the better part of the past 7 or 8 months, and I really want to give credit to Walker Industries and Mountain View. Those two companies, which own the property as a partnership, they went out and really worked to find a suitor for the property. And it was through their diligence that Seasons came to the table. And then I remember the meeting where we had Walker and Mountain View and the Seasons team and our team from Economic Development Planning. And we were at City Hall, and this is probably going back now 4 or 5 months. And it was from Seasons, tell us why we should invest in your city. And it was our opportunity to put everything on the table. And they said, your city is in competition with this one, this one, and this one. So we're either going to invest now or we may invest 5 years from now. And we put up everything we could into that meeting. And I remember getting a phone call from the CEO a couple days later, and he said, Mr. Mayor, you've convinced us. That was a turning point for us, because I think that's how a lot of the people outside of, or a lot of companies and businesses outside of Niagara see us, is they don't see what we see taking place. And so they don't necessarily see the opportunity, because I don't think we're promoting it as much as we should be. And so that meeting really put St. Catharines in front of them and actually moved St. Catharines to the top of the list. And that was exciting. And that is, and I think from the public's perspective, I think they need to hear that as well, because investment doesn't just come to your door. You have to fight for it. And this was an example of us fighting to be the top of the list, and we succeeded. And I think we just got to do more of that and be out there and publicly. And I said this to a presentation I was making a couple days ago. we got to get a swagger back. We got to have a pride in our community. And when we were sitting at that table, we had confidence that we could sell our community to this company, and it paid off. So it's a significant investment.
Well, take us behind the scenes. How did you convince them?
We talked about the quality of life. We talked about how the investments into downtown were creating a walkable community. We talked about how our proximity to different markets like the Hamilton and the Toronto market, for those who were looking to move here but still be close to their friends and family. We talked about how the design of this location was in proximity to the hospital. We talked about the hospital. A lot of people still don't know that over $800 million was invested into what is largely a regional healthcare clinic, a healthcare hospital, with the St. Catharines Hospital built into it. So we talked about the investments in 4th Avenue. And when you looked at it, and you looked at it from a locational point of view, on a river, right down from a hospital, right next door to all the investments that have made into the downtown, they were like, this all makes sense. But we take for granted what's around us. And we look at the Performing Arts Center and the Meridian Center and Montebello Park, and we say, oh, this is great, it's in our backyard. But we don't realize that we have to continuously tell the broader public that these are investments that are taking place in our community. And so that was the, I think that's now the example that we've set with Seasons, that we've got to do that more and more with other companies outside of Niagara.
You were mentioning this is one of the largest private investments. What is that going to do for taxes for the city? That'll
be significant when you look at that piece of property and the fact that it was never a taxable property because it was a payment in lieu of. So we got what was largely heads and beds. So the number of beds that were in the hospital, the city got a reimbursement for it. So when it goes to switch to private hands, that will be in the millions of dollars in additional tax revenue that comes now back into the city. And to put it in context, we're about $100 million budget. If it comes in at a $3 million tax property tax bill, that's 3 percentage points on a tax on our overall budget. So it really does provide, because it's and you know it's all based on if it grows, how high they build. That's what'll have an impact on the overall tax base. So you look at that and you say this is significant, not just for the jobs, not just for the investment, but for the long-term legacy of having new property tax revenue being generated from it. So it's a win all the way around.
Of course, that property's been empty since the hospital moved to the new location on 4th Avenue, which makes us wonder what's happening with the one on Queenston Street.
Yep.
We haven't seen a lot from the outside. Is anything going on behind the scenes?
And it's a similar situation where you have the owner has a hospital redevelopment that they're just completing up in Sudbury. And so now that they're complete on that one, and what had happened is the company bought both hospitals at the same time. And they had to make a decision. They couldn't invest in both. So at that point, they made a decision for Sudbury. And now that they're completed that project, we've been told by the owner that their priority is this site. So what does that mean? The planning department for the city has been working with their planner to ensure that the site plan that comes forward is the site plan that will be developed. And from what I've been told by our planning department is that they're very close to submitting an official site plan that will then allow for permits to be triggered and everything else. So if I were to give you a timeline, it's within the next couple of months you'll see much more activity in terms of applying for the process to get the buildings in place. Again, I don't know what it's going to look like, but we've been informed that they're getting ready to make the move here. And that's exciting.
Okay, so it's stuff that residents won't be able to see right now, but things are happening in
Things are happening.
City Hall.
And it's not, you know, if it was an absentee landlord and we didn't have contact on a regular basis, I'd be concerned. But this company is a willing partner. They've been at the table. They've been in City Hall. They've been working with the staff. They're excited to get down here. And you can understand they're just finishing up on another project. So from what I've been told, we're the next on their list.
I wanted to ask you about another big development in St. Catharines too. That's the former GM site on,
Yep.
on Ontario Street, down the road from the Hotel D1. Bayshore, which owns the property, tweeted out a photo of you taking a tour last week. What did you learn? What can you tell us about
Yeah.
what's going on there?
It was a bit of a trip down memory lane, in that I remember as a school student and going on school trips to the GM site on Ontario Street. So Robert and myself took a walk through the east side, which is where the Hag Bowl Arena is, across the road there. So we did a whole tour of that. Largely all of the equipment has been removed. There's still some equipment in there that they're moving out. And on the west side, which is the river side, what the public doesn't see, but what's happening is that about 50% of the buildings have been taken down behind the red brick wall that we all see on Ontario Street. And the way that it's being designed is they take it down from the river moving towards the road, and then the last takedown will be the two-story red brick, and they'll fold that into the property so that they don't have to close the road down. So they're doing it in a staged manner, and it's being done in a way that when it's complete, it'll all be taken to grade, and at the same time, they're working on plans for what can we put here, what can we put here, how can we redevelop the site. And you know, we've talked about the extension of Carlton Street across the river, and that is something that has to present itself because there's a right of way that the region owns. In terms of there's a right of way there's an easement there, and the region and the city need to come to the table if we're interested in putting a bridge across there. So all those discussions have to take place now as that land is being remediated. So there's a lot of work being done. They're scheduling probably another 8 months before all the property has been taken down to ground. But they're working hard, and you're going to start. I think the public's going to start to see the machinery as it gets closer to the road. And you know, it's the first manufacturing building there was 1910 on the west side. So it was neat to go inside on the tour and see the different materials that were used to build the factory as it went from 1910 to 1930 to 1942 to 1946, and just to see the different material and design work. So it's an important part of our history, but just as important, it's a part of where we're going. And so we want to make sure that in partnership with Bayshore, whatever is being built there, whatever comes to fruition, it's a part of where we're going as a city. And I'm confident that we've got good partners there.
Okay. Well, where we're going as a city, I'm just going to switch gears to the budget, which is going to City Council on Monday. They're not actually going to be debating it on Monday. They're just getting it in their hands, and then the big budget night will be March 7th.
March 7th.
What is the tax increase this year? And
so our expenditure increase for the City of St. Catharines is 2.19, and so overall tax increase for the expenditure. So I'm going to correct myself in terms of what we're coming in at. We're coming in at about 4% as an expenditure on the city ledger. When you combine it with the region, we'll come in at about 2.19, and so that's what the homeowner is going to see is 2.19, and we are aiming to get our expenditures down to the rate of inflation for the City of St. Catharines. But this is we're only entering into the first full year of operation, complete operation of the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. That's about 1% increase on our overall tax base. And so when you look at that in terms of where we are from a budget perspective, if we, in a normalized state, we're aiming for 2%, would be close to the rate of inflation. This year we're just around the 4% range, and when you include the Performing Arts Centre. So we've tried very hard to ensure that the services that are expected by the citizens of our city are balanced with the need to be fiscally responsible. And we've introduced now multi-year budgeting, which hadn't been done previously. We're using 3-year actuals from previous years, which hadn't been done previously. So we now have a better sense of the trend lines for expenditures in departments. And so what you're going to see moving forward is a much more actualized budget process that'll get us down to that point of inflation. And again, I'm going to put it out there that there's the balance of growing the city and investing in things like the Hotel Dieu site or the Ontario Street site or the Queenston Street site, which takes much more staff complement, and there's incentive programs that go along with that to make sure that these developments are moving forward. We have to make those investments that are a draw on our city expenditures. And in doing so, we're able to grow the city. So while there's folks who would say, well, go for 0 or go for 1% or hit 2% in the city's own expenditures, the danger in doing that is we start to cut our ability to grow. And I'm not going to stand in front of the public and say, for the sake of growth, I'm going to cut. You have to balance both. And I think this budget has done a great job. The budget committee has done an amazing job with staff who have been exceptional trying to find ways to reduce the cost in the services that we provide. This budget finds that balance, and I do think that as we move forward and other properties that are going to generate additional revenue come online, we should get back down to that normalized position of 2% would be the range that we'd be aiming for. So it was a second year of a tight budget, and I think they hit the mark on it. So I congratulate the budget committee and staff for all the hard work, and I hope we have a good, robust discussion at council. And Toronto City Council had a record. They passed their budget in one day. That's the first time they've done that. I hope for the city of St. Catharines that we don't have a marathon budget night, that we actually come prepared as a council. We ask the important questions, and then we approve a budget that's responsible for the city of St. Catharines.
Well, I don't went till 2 a.m. last year, but now you've set aside a second day this year. So if you don't get to the
I remember the 2 o'clock last year. It was a struggle, and it was a struggle because we had to make tough decisions. And that's what happens when you have expenditures and deferred costs that had been kicked down the road that we had to deal with. The other point that I want to bring up about the budget is that we have put in a infrastructure levy. And this is important because we hadn't been putting aside funds to address our infrastructure deficit. So for those who are watching at home, it's like you have a leaky roof, and yet you don't put funds aside to cover that cost. You just let the roof continue to get worse. And you just continue every year to spend, and then when you have to repair the roof, you look and go, I don't have any money. Essentially, we have an infrastructure deficit of about $140 million. We're hoping that the federal government comes to the table to help close some of that gap with our hard infrastructure. But we also think it's prudent that as a city, we start to put aside 1% of our annual budget in terms of our annual levy that goes right into infrastructure. And so that goes into an infrastructure reserve, and we start to deploy that to help reduce the amount of infrastructure projects that we've delayed year over year. That's a responsible way of budgeting. Kitchener-Waterloo did it 20 years ago. Hamilton has done it for the past 10 years. And it's built up reserves that allows you to deal with water main breaks that we experienced last year. It allows you to get ahead of significant infrastructure challenges that come from when we start building things. And so it's a prudent form of budgeting. It's a prudent form of creating fiscal stability. And that's another part of the budget that gets us to that 4%. Overall, it'll be about a 2.19 increase. And I think that's a number that most people in this community can accept.
The 4% is slightly larger than last year. Is it because of the PAC, or were there other
PAC and the levy? It's the PAC and the levy. If we didn't do the infrastructure levy and we didn't have the PAC, we'd be coming in at about 2%.
Okay. You're also talking about the reserve, and there's another reserve that the budget committee is suggesting too for snow removal, which probably would have been helpful last year. How is it going this year with the snow budget?
I'm not going to tell you how is it going, because then I'm going to jinx. We're going to get snowfall in March and April. Are you kidding me?
It could happen.
Are you kidding? No. So what happens is that the reserve has been set up so that if we have a surplus at the end of the year, that it doesn't simply roll into next year's operations. What we'll do is we'll take that and put it into a snow reserve. And what we're trying to do is that, so when you get the peaks and valleys of snow or no snow, the reserve will normalize the peaks and valleys. And that Again, that is something that should have been set up long time ago. That would have helped offset last year's significant deficit when it came to the snow removal. This year we're doing well, and people need to also understand that even if we have a mild winter, this from here to April, we may get hit in October, November in the same year, and it may then take up all of our reserves. So we won't know until the end of the year how much we can put into the reserve, but it was an important move to make to start to establish that.
I wanted to get to some reader questions before, because we're running out of some time here, and we had some questions that were posted to our Facebook page for you. We have one question from Dave Carey, who's asking what you see or what you've heard about the future of the old Port Weller dry docks.
Great question, Dave. And anyone who's either walked the Welland Canal Parkway down there or rode their bike or driven by the canal will see that actually there's another significant structure that's been erected. Algoma has the slip, so Algoma's doing ship repair for the first time in a long time, a dry dock ship repair. Enercon and Rankin are in there doing construction, building the columns for the wind turbines. And then it looks to be additional work will be brought in through another company. There's about 200 people working at that site. Dave, take a ride down there and take a look at what's going on. But that is seeing more economic activity now than pretty much since the heyday of the Port Weller dry docks back when I was growing up and hanging out in that area. So it's a very lively area for economic investment and growth right now.
Okay. And another question was from Dave Floos. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. He's asking about the boulevard on 4th Avenue. He said it's in a constant state of weed pulling, pruning, cutting, repairing, and during the growing season, one lane is constantly being closed. And he's just wondering if you would consider leaving the trees but replacing the space between them with paving stone. Are there any plans for 4th Avenue? And
I think it's a very good observation, because people, including our staff, have talked about how that is a challenging, because of the level of traffic in that area, it's a very challenging boulevard to maintain. And so the staff actually, and I got to compliment the city staff in the Parks and Rec, have come forward and said, we have ideas on how to reduce this. And one of the ideas is, let's maintain the trees, but then find ways to decoratively put product in there that's not of an organic nature, so like a decorative stone and that will reduce our time spent in the boulevard, that then frees them up to go work in the parks, go work in the signature gardens that we have. So I think there's a plan coming forward from Parks and Rec that will talk about how we need to rethink that boulevard, maintain the green treescape canopy, but at the same time reduce the maintenance on the ground, which I think is an astute point.
Right. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming in today. And
that's it. This is it. We've run out of time.
Yeah, it went by really quickly.
It was like it just started. So I do appreciate you having me on, and to the viewers at home, again, send in your questions to the hashtag #AskSendzik. Spell it right, SENDZIK. And I look forward to having even more questions coming forward. And Karina, next time if you got to cut me off because I'm talking too long, just kick me or something. You could kick me.
Thanks for joining us.